So, welcome to our talk on the COVID-19 crisis in Chile. My name is Josefa Ramirez. I will be hosting and interviewing my two guests, Paula and Katia. And maybe we'll begin with a little introduction of your names and what you do. So Paula, maybe you can start.
Hello everyone, I'm Paula Fuentealba. I'm an anthropologist, have a master's degree on social environmental studies, and nowadays I work on ONG Sur, an organization who works on heritage, cultural heritage, food sovereignty, and now I participate on Bloque Mujeres No Engenche, a feminist organization that works on Concepción, a city on the south of Chile.
Yeah, Katia, you can continue.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Katia. I'm from Concepción as well. I am an activist scholar. I work at a university, at a local university here in Concepción. And I also am a member of a food co-op, which has been working in this topic for about 1 year and a half.
So, as I've said, my name is Josefa Ramirez, and I'm still in university. I study sociology and cultural studies, and I've been doing political work with a group of Chileans that regrouped in Leipzig in Germany, and we've been doing protests and different ways of spreading awareness of the cause in Chile since the social uprising in October. And in this context, we've also created this campaign and started a fundraiser to raise money for Chilean people going hungry, basically. And in this context, we've also organized events and different stuff. And that's why we're also doing this interview to raise awareness on the cause. And today I think we'll talk a little bit about the political and social context in Chile. Obviously about the social uprising, because it's very important and it sets like the political backdrop of everything that's going on right now. Then we'll talk a little bit about how Chile has been affected during the pandemic and what's been going on. And then obviously the reason we're here, about the community work that you guys have been doing and then Chileans all over Chile have been doing, which is community kitchens as a way of as a grassroots program to help the people. And then obviously about ways to help that for international viewers. So as I've said, I think it's really important to talk about the social uprising that happened in October. Just to summarize, people started protesting for a dignified life, for a better healthcare system, better educational system, and many other demands. Maybe Katia can start. How did you experience the uprising in your own community? What were your experiences with the uprising and your opinions on it?
It's kind of a story, like a movie, when we go back and we remember October last year, but because I don't think, we all always thought that this was something that was going to happen at some point in Chile. I mean, this neoliberal model, which has been so insane for so many years, and we always thought that this was something that was going to happen at some point. But for some reason, it was a bit unexpected in the moment that happened, because this started as a number of protests in Santiago, because the metro fare increased and the secondary students were the ones who decided to protest against this government policy. But then the message became much bigger, and they said, well, this is not about the 30 Chilean pesos that where their favorite was increasing. It's about 30 years of neoliberalism and inequality and all the poverty and all the kind of problems derived from the neoliberal system. And in the case of the cities apart from Santiago, because in Santiago this started on the 18th of October, but in the case of Concepcion, for example, it started on the 19th of October. And basically it turned into a massive uprising where people took to the streets and started marching and protesting and banging pots, which is something very common in the history of revolution in Chile, that protesting against the regime during Pinochet, during the dictatorship, and then it came back, and barricades on the streets and people marching and hundreds and thousands of people, and then the protests continue. That was something that, for example, in the groups I was part of, it was all the time, well, this is going to end very quickly, but it never ended. It didn't end quickly. It continued. And then the social organization started, because I was part of the co-op, but many of us from the co-op, we joined local assemblies, which is, I think, pretty much what Paula does as well, like in this kind of also local assembly, popular assembly in her territory. In my case, I joined the assembly which was close to my neighborhood. And that's pretty much how it started.
Mm. And what do you think set this movement apart? Because, I mean, there have been social movements in Chile before, student protests, many different kinds. What do you think set this movement apart from others? Why do you think did it have its longevity, or like why did it last so long? Maybe Paula can answer that as well.
We all think that this was because it was a protest for to end neoliberalism on all its parts. It's against private pensions. It's for better education, better health. We don't have any social security in Chile. This model put market on the center, not people on center. So that's was one of the reivindications that on protests on the streets people was claiming of. We were all claiming for a better life, to sustain life. That the state that has to assure dignity to the people.
Yeah.
Just adding to that, I think that I think another kind of, I don't know if it's a cause, but we were experiencing lots of unfortunate comments by politicians. They were constantly kind of saying very stupid things, such as, I don't know, we have a crap health system, so basically, no, but you enjoy doing the line while you're waiting for your healthcare, or if the price in the metro fare is going to increase, then you need to wake up early. So it's this complete lack of empathy and understanding from the political class, that I think made people very, very angry. And I think the movements from the past, they were focused on one single demand. And as Paula said, now these demands were much broader. It's not about the metro fare, it's what's about a healthcare, neoliberal private healthcare system, private education, a private fund pension scheme. So it's just we are surrounded by the privatization of our lives. So it was like a stop. We demand dignity from once.
Yeah. Do you think that this you could say it's like a disconnect between the people and the political class. Do you think this is also that has also been carried through to the pandemic and to other issues, not only the movement, but is this like symptomatic of how politics work in Chile, like this disconnect or lack of empathy?
Yeah, we can see that every day. Since the uprising in October, it was more evident, but right now we can see that the help that the government is giving to people is miserable. We uh, we have here in the territory, we can see that some families receive just a box with a few with a like a food basket that is not enough to survive a month. Um, Basic incomes are not enough to sustain life on a month on a four people family. So it's really violent to live in Chile with these conditions to many people. So with the pandemics, people cannot work every day like they used to. There are a lot of restrictions, isolations, and so that affects people on their common lives.
Mm-hmm. And talking about the pandemic, I mean, one of the biggest demands, or a very big demand of it, was the reform, or rather like the rebuilding of a better, safer, fairer healthcare system. How do you think that the pandemic relates to the demands that were made during the uprising? Like, I mean, it's kind of ironic that there was a huge uprising about healthcare and pensions and everything, and now we're like in the middle of a pandemic. How does this feel, and how does this relate to the uprising? Katja or Paula, whoever.
Well, I think what we're experiencing in Chile is quite unique because we jump from one of, I think, the greatest uprisings in our country, yeah, at least in contemporary history, to an historic pandemic worldwide. So in our case, I think the experience is quite unique because we faced brutal state repression during the uprising. Social movements, assemblies were also target of state intelligence somehow, and there was all this kind of very tense political environment during this period, and there was all the hopes for the movement was that in March the uprising will continue, but the pandemic came and somehow it forced us to go back to our homes, supposedly, because that was the thing. It was our fear as movements was that with the pandemic we were going to stop working politically and collectively. But what the pandemic showed us, I think, is that the uprising strengthened the communities. So we are prepared to solve and to deal with the issues that the government is unable to deal with because it doesn't want to deal with it, because it's a fundamental neoliberal government which doesn't care, it doesn't deal with any social security and care for people. So I think right now, what the pandemic shows is that we lived on debt before, because we are the experiment of neoliberalism in the world. Most people's incomes, they are not enough to live during the month. So basically, what people did to survive is that they live with credit cards. So that's why they were able to feed themselves. But now, with the pandemic, jobs, many people have become redundant. So then they're not having access to easy credit that they had before. So now people are hungry, and this is very, very serious and urgent, something very urgent to deal with, because I mean, a basic human right is to be able to eat.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, you could really say that it's like kicked off a humanitarian crisis, because it really showed, like, it really stressed the flaws of the neoliberal system that has been in place in Chile for 30 plus years. So maybe for people to get a general idea, I mean, we've talked about hunger and job loss. How else has like everyday life been affected in Chile since the start of the pandemic? Maybe Paula can answer this one.
Apart from hunger, the physical isolation, it is very difficult to many people, especially elderly people, that they cannot came out of their homes in some cities that have a quarantine, and they can come out of their homes and they cannot have access to incomes. Their private pensions are miserable. There's not enough to can buy their food. They have to, as Kate says, they have to pay their debts. They have to, their basic incomes are to pay debts, not to live. So that's a very critical situation. And children are on their homes. They are studying at home right now. Schools are not functioning. This situation is very critical to teachers as well, because they have to work on their homes, creating ways to have regular classes when in this context we cannot do it. So children are in their homes trying to learn, trying to pass this year, and maybe they are not learning, but the government says it's all normal. We can adapt this situation to end this year, the scholar year, very in the regular basis, but we cannot do that. And some maybe Katia can complement on this.
Yeah, and also, for example, with this kind of homeschooling or homeworking, some privileged people and only some privileged people can deal with this in a very good way, because if you think that the general kind of structural situation in Chile is that we have a lot of people living with minimum salary, that means if you are with your all your children at home in a very small house, not proper heating, for example, we are now during winter time with no enough internet connection, because also it's like sometimes we assume that people have internet connection. Well, that's not the case for all of people. For example, many people in Chile, they use their data, their phone data. It's not that they have proper Wi-Fi from their houses, so they're connecting through their phone's data to get classes, to get into classes and to get the material from their schools. So there is the whole like inequality in Chile. You can see it in school. You can also see it, unfortunately, in the death toll that we are seeing now by COVID, because if you see all the kind of the borders, the cities where you have more deaths by COVID, the poorest cities in the country, the ones who get more people death by the virus. So somehow inequality, it's there are expressions of inequality in all the aspects of our life.
Yeah, it really stresses inequality. Like pandemics or social crises really show the inequalities that persist in everyday, like in every aspect of life. And talking about how communities are affected, Chile as a whole has been one of the most affected countries in the world, or it's like it was in the top 10 at some point. I think last week it was in the top 10 of the most cases. Why do you think that is? Why do you think, I mean, obviously inequality shows itself in the pandemic, but why do you think that Chile as a whole has been as affected as it is?
I think that the government, the political class, has no empathy to understand the conditions that people live in Chile. There are a great distance on that, because they don't understand that people in some cities live overcrowded, and that's because they cannot pay for a decent home. We cannot live without a debt. We have debts to study. We have debt to have a house, maybe even to eat. So we cannot live like that, but the government doesn't understand it. So the measures to affront the pandemic are always insufficient, because they have these measures of quarantine in that city, but this city not. So there are some restrictions that are changing every day, but there is not a central a management of the situation. Because now it's out of control, and people need to eat. So because they have no works, they have no jobs, they have to be outside selling things, working on the streets. So there is where they are the most contagious places. So it's a hard situation.
So yeah, and the other thing, it's about kind of the decision made by the government about protecting economy over people. I think that's quite clear, and we have seen it in other countries as well. In the case of Chile, it's very, very clear that the decision is, let's avoid as much as possible full lockdowns, because with full lockdowns, we would put in risk economies. So that's why we have this system where only in certain cities, there are full lockdowns, but in other cities, we don't. And because the government is not willing to provide a salary, for example, or a benefit system that allows workers and families to remain at home safe. So that's why I think that's the core of neoliberalism as well. So life is a commodity, basically, and that's why the response of communities is so necessary today to deal with this crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll get to the community efforts in a minute, but before that, I wanted to ask you what you think the long-term effects of this pandemic will be, maybe on the uprising was basically squashed because of the pandemic, but maybe on the just in general, like, what do you think will be the takeaway from the pandemic for the people, for the political classes? What will be the long-term effects? What do you think, maybe? Paula, or?
We are just starting an economical crisis because of the pandemics, and I think it will be a long-term thing, because this just started on March. So right now, maybe there are people that just right now lose their jobs because they are doing classes. In the case of teachers, many teachers, for example, they were starting on March on work or search for a job on a school, they cannot do it. There are people that was working on, I don't know, an enterprise that they closed because of the pandemic, and they are not receiving a salary. This happened like, I don't know, a month ago, but the consequences of that will be right now passing the winter. So even if on September we can came out of the streets and they been doing our common lives, people will not have money to do it, and they will cannot be using credit cards anymore because they have their debts, previous debts. So the government have been giving some measures to middle class to help middle class, like using our own private pension funds, and that's very ridiculous because they are using our own money to solve the crisis.
Yeah.
Always, historically, people are financing the crisis, not the market. The market is the responsible. So the enterprises, the political class are the ones who want that have to affront this crisis and put the resources to that. But always we are paying for the crisis that others provoke on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, yeah, as you've said, it's like a historical thing that the crises are carried on the people's backs. Maybe as a last question concerning the pandemic, I mean, there was supposed to be an election on April 26th over the new constitution, and obviously this was instrumentalized and it was postponed to October, I think. Do you think that the handling of the pandemic will have an influence on the elections, or do you think that maybe because it's taken so long that the public opinion will change again from where it was a few months ago, where there was like an overwhelming support of a new constitution? What do you think will happen with that, or will there even be an election?
Well, I don't read the future, so I don't think I can kind of go ahead with saying what is going to happen. But well, to begin with, the referendum we're going to have in April was not necessarily the demands of the people. So we had like there was, as usual in Chilean politics, there was an agreement within the coalitions in power, which decided they finally agreed on this referendum. They were all the time trying to stay as far as possible from this kind of pure idea of a new constitution built from below by the peoples, you know. But it was still a very, very important step in Chilean history that there was this chance to change some things at the constitutional level. And it was quite a very, it was very convenient for the government that the pandemic came, because that was completely cancelled. And I don't really know when it's going to happen, really, considering the kind of the health situation. But I don't know if I could just have an hypothesis. I think during the pandemic, people's perceptions, opinions, they haven't changed much. Quite on the contrary, because we now it's very, very clear the way the government and right-wing people they are constantly stopping policies that will help working class people. So in a way, if they are constantly doing that, people then are just seeing that they are not doing anything for them. So in a way, that is those are conditions for change and for supporting change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want to add something to that, Paula?
Well, as Katia says, we are not sure that on October this votation will be or not. The government always are trying to stop that, but I think that with this community that has been building since October, the uprising, maybe we are building the strength to sustain the idea that this votation has to be. Many people are claiming to that on different ways, saying that this private pension system has to stop. Recently, this week, the parliament is discussing the idea to withdraw to the early withdrawal of the 10% of private pensions to people that can affront this crisis. That's many people will see that as a heavy blow to the government because they don't want to lose because the government doesn't want to change this system, this private pension system, and all people want to do that. So these kind of discussions are oriented to change in the constitution.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the government's response to the pandemic and the very poor handling of it. Now, maybe I wanted to talk a bit about community efforts and how the people have reacted to this pandemic and to the humanitarian crisis that it's kicked off. And then, of course, talk about community kitchens as a very, very important community effort in Chilean history. And maybe one of you or both of you could maybe give like the viewers a bit of an overview of how and why community kitchens are so relevant in Chile. And yeah, maybe start there.
Yeah, well, so as I said before, the uprising in Chile, the October's revolt, and all the months that followed, I think they contributed a lot to this, to strengthen the communities and assemblies and movements, grassroots organizations in different cities and neighborhoods. And from there, with the pandemic and realizing that the government was not taking care of people really, is that all these organizations and these grassroots organizations started to set up different things, but the most important one I think is the community kitchens, which is a resistance strategy. Not new in Chile. This is a resistance strategy that was very popular during the dictatorship because there was also a huge economic crisis, and that period was a very dark period in Chilean history. And people at the grassroots, they all the time managed to survive during the tough conditions. So it's very beautiful as well that the communities, we haven't lost our memory and the memories from the past and all these strategies that allowed us to survive in other moments of our history. So right now, what the thing, it's not only the community kitchens, but that I think is one of the most important strategies happening right now in the neighborhood, which is meant to deal with the hunger crisis, basically. So people, neighbors get together and do fundraising campaigns or donate their own groceries or do activities. They go, for example, outside the supermarkets and ask for donations, and then they set up these communal meals where they offer people who doesn't have the money to eat, so they cook for the community, and that's something that's happening since, I don't know, early in the pandemic, since April, I think. And in some cases, they are doing it every day. So there are some, for example, cases here in my city where they are setting up like permanent community kitchens. So every day they are feeding 200 people, and so on. So it's quite an important strategy coming from below.
Yeah, and as you said, it's a historical thing that has been done for a long time. Paula, I think you had said that you work in an organization that focuses on food sovereignty as well.
Yeah, and well, I participate on many organizations, but one of that is when I work at ONG Sur. We have we have functioned for over 30 years, and on the beginnings of these organizations was oriented to build sustainable cities, on the focus on food as the main of the thing that sustain life, because it came out when the final years of dictatorship, people have no work, they have hunger, so it was it came out a kind of project to give people the basic incomes to build their own how can I say that, to raise their own food on their backyards.
Okay.
So that's what, but on a collective way. So it was like a way to confront the crisis together, growing food to eat collectively, and sustain community kitchens as well.
And but how did no, please continue. Sorry.
And this was a work with people that came from rural communities that now lives on the cities, and they have that memory that they can grow their own food, so they can adapt these kind of things on their backyards, because they can eat better, sustain their families, even if they don't have a regular job.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of this kind of things are emerging because of the work of assemblies on grassroots organizations right now. There are some people that are saying, "Oh, we have to grow our own food. We have to live confront the food problems together."
And this has continued also during the pandemic, or how did your work change because of the pandemic?
People that has their crops are maintained always. So this is always a little scale production, small scale, not to to sell it, is for their own consumption. So that's a way we can see that if you grow your own food, you can assure a part of your sustainability to sustain your own life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. It's a really interesting way to look at food sovereignty, especially in like I live in Germany, which is like it's so far away, and it's like such a different experience with food and with how you sustain your life. Um, but yeah, coming back to community kitchens, maybe I lost my train of thought.
Can I follow up to what
Yeah,
Paula
of
was
course,
saying?
of course,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course.
Especially about the food, this point of food sovereignty. I think well, the community gardens. It's also a new. It's not a new, but it's getting more popular during these past months. And here in our city as well, do we have some examples of people from certain neighborhoods setting up community garden under this idea that you I mean seeking autonomy. Basically it's about we can we need to deal with our food because we're not getting we don't have a welfare state, so then well, and even if we have maybe if we do have a welfare state, we also need to to seek for autonomy as communities. In the case of the COP, the food COP where I'm part, we also embrace this idea of food sovereignty, and our kind of task, our main goal is how we skip all these sellers in the middle of the chain, of the productive chain, because in a way, if we go and we buy at the supermarket, we've been kind of also discussing a lot about only eating seasonal food and fruits and vegetables, and about kind of also raising awareness about that and about buying to local producers. So now, for example, we are buying most of our the nice thing of I think this is also something that is increasing and now during the pandemic with the pricing, and now with the pandemic that we have lots of food co-ops or food networks where people are buying together. So they are getting together and they go and they collectively buy their groceries and their fruits and their vegetables, because on the one hand they save money, but on the other hand we are making political our everyday life. It's also about like it's a we believe it's a political act, not kind of deal with food at an individual level, but also kind of trying to break the ideology of neoliberalism in things as kind of very things we need to do every day to deal with our everyday life, which is buying food. So we are doing that in a collective way, and that also means that we are breaking into we're attempting to break with this role assigned to women, that women are the only ones dealing with food, for example. So in the COP, we are half men, half women, and in some moments so we are making that break as well, kind of trying to say we can deal with this in a collective way. We're also attempting to break with some patriarchal trends within this topic, and it's getting very popular. But a lot of people from local assemblies as well are kind of trying to buy food together and connecting with local producers. So we eat only what the local producers grow and the time that they grow it. So it's about kind of also changing our lifestyles and not being, I don't know, expecting that we have fruits and vegetables are impossible to grow in our territory and now in this season. So it's I think also a bit of a change of mentality, how we see things in terms of food, for example.
Do you think this could also be a positive, positive change in the community because of the pandemic? Like, do you think this could be carried on when this is all over and maybe the country has been recuperated a bit from the economic crisis? Do you think that this could carry into the future and into the mindset of people?
I think since the uprising and with the pandemics as well, we have seen more empathy on a whole level. So more empathy with the people that is giving our food on the community, on the rural communities, and with the how can I say that, we are neoliberalism always put the market on the center. So now putting the people on the center is giving us the opportunity to reconnect with some things that are basic to sustain life. Food is is our base on everything. It's a political act. So if we take care of our own food and how we feed, how we feed ourselves and our communities, it's a whole change of way of life, and that change is not as an individual change. It's always a collectively change.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to follow up to that, Katja, or no? Maybe we can start wrapping up a bit. And what do you think is like important to hear, like people who want to get informed about the situation in Chile? What do you think it's like the most important take from this talk, or what do you want to share with the international community? One of you.
Well, I know people are usually stuck in their own crises and in their own problems, and each country have their own issues going on. But I think in moments like this, international solidarity is very, very important, because it's also this sense of, what they call the global north and the global south. If it has any importance, is that at the geopolitical level and economical level in the world, there are also huge inequalities, and I think the solidarity there is it's a political act as well. It's not about neoliberal charity. I think there's a big difference between grassroots solidarity and neoliberal charity. And now the strategies that we've been raising from below, as community kitchens and so on, they are right now, the funding come from the people who are struggling the most still. So it's very difficult to gather money for food. So it's very simple, I think, and in that context, international solidarity to support the community kitchens in Chile, for example, I think is very, very important. But under that political assumption that this is not charity, without the political essence, I think it's important to clarify. And also, I think what is so very important is that to spread the word about what's going on in countries like Chile, in Latin America, that the reality of the COVID is not the same as in the global north or in Europe, that here things are much tougher, and that needs to be known in other parts of the world.
Yeah, definitely. And Paula, do you want to follow up to that or add something?
With my companions, we always said that masks cannot silence hunger, cannot silence the rage of people, and cannot stop empathy and solidarity acts. So we are organized to give dignity to people through food. We are sustaining a community kitchen, something like that. We every Sunday we are feeding about 50 families. There are many other community kitchens all over the city and other cities of Chile. They want to sustain life of people with solidarity strategies, and we know that the crisis, we can affront this together, not with the maybe with not with the help of the government, because the politicians doesn't know about poverty. They doesn't know about hunger. They doesn't know about don't have a job, do not receive any help. And people can help people. This is the only way to sustain life nowadays.
Yeah.
So with food, we are trying to give dignity to families, to declare we are here and we can help you if you need it. Not like a charity, not it's like a political act to help each other.
Yeah. I would like to add to that, or maybe remind people that are watching that we are still collecting money. If you follow us on Instagram at Chile in Flammen, the same name as the channel info, then you can find the link to our PayPal account where you can donate money. We support community kitchens in Chile. And if you are in Leipzig, you can also come to the events that we're organizing. And yeah, I also think that international solidarity is really important right now, especially because obviously the situations are extremely different. And as we've said many times before, like this pandemic has really just stressed inequalities on all levels of life and in every aspect of life. And yeah, I think we can come to the end at this point. I really want to thank you guys for being here and for taking the time to talk to me. I think it's really important to have these kinds of conversations where people can watch and learn more about the situation in Chile and in other countries. So yeah, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you for the invitation.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, then thank you also to everyone who was watching. And we will be doing more episodes of this, talking to other people. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed the talk and learned more about ways to help and how the situation is in Chile. And we'll see you next time. Bye. Bye.